Hello, YouTube, and welcome to the very first episode of Josh's video journal, titled The Art of Self-Discovery. My name is Josh, if that wasn't obvious enough, okay? Not Joshua, not Joshy, Josh, okay? Josh. Welcome to my channel. I just want to say before anything else, from the bottom of my heart, thank you, okay? Thank you to anyone taking the time out of their day to watch or interact with my content. Whether you're fully locked in, listening to everything I say, or it's just playing in the background while you're doing something else. Either way, it genuinely means a lot to me because, time is obviously one of the most valuable things a person can have in their life. And the fact that people are willing to spend even a small portion of that listening to my thoughts, my experiences, and my perspectives, that is something that I deeply appreciate, okay? For context, this whole thing, before this was even a channel, before I even had the thought of making a YouTube channel, this originally started from my Instagram account. I'll put that right there if you guys want to follow. This started from my Instagram account. And on that account, I posted stories on my close friends. So to all my close friends, hello. This is the fulfillment of that, okay? I posted stories just as like a way for me to discuss topics like these, just for fun. It was never anything serious. And I think even now, it's not going to be serious. Don't take any of this seriously. It just so happens that I'm reaching out to a wider audience, the global market, okay? Hello world. I'm using this, platform as a medium to reach out to a wider audience. And yeah, that's pretty much it. With that being said, I do think that, in regard to our topic, I think that self-discovery is something that's never really going to end. You could live 100,000 years and you're always going to discover new things about yourself because times change and people change. And people change with the times and the times change with the people. Okay? So you're always going to, rebirth, essentially. Self-discovery is not really ever going to end until you die. And I think that this channel is going to be a way for me to document that process in real time. So that's why I chose this topic for today, because this is also going to be an introduction to the dynamic of this channel. Okay? This is going to be a means for me to document my own self-discovery. Not just as a person, but as a content creator. Before we get started, rules and regulations. Let's set down some standards, okay? For me and for the audience. Number one, I intend to avoid having to cut anything out, okay? So this is probably going to get long. Keep that in mind. The goal right now is for me to be able to discuss my whole topic outline within one take. I have a topic outline written here that I'm kind of reading just so I can keep everything smooth and concise as possible and efficient with my time because, again, time is important. Number two, I will attempt to use purely English for the sake of inclusivity. Now, for those of you who don't know, the new viewers who just stumbled on my channel, I am Filipino. Filipino from the Philippines. Kamusta kababayan? That's not how I speak Tagalog. Gantong magsalita ng Tagalog, compadre. Okay? Now, let's continue. As much as possible, I intend to remain somewhat consistent when it comes to my uploading scheduling. But I think ultimately, I'll probably just post whenever I feel like I have to post. Or not really when I have to post, but whenever I feel like I have something meaningful to share with you guys, right? Because I'd rather upload authentically than to just force content out, for slop, for the sake of, a schedule. Another thing, these videos that I'm going to put out, they're going to be based primarily off of philosophical stuff, but also biblical stuff. So for those of you non-religious guys out there, you might get turned off by that. I hope not. Please please keep an open mind. And I will also keep an open mind. Let's both keep an open mind out there so we can have a sense of discourse and dialogue, right? Um, Aside from philosophical ideas, ideologies, and biblical scripture, I'm also going to mention some personal experiences and opinions. So, as such, it is important to take everything I say with a grain of salt, and most importantly, do your own research. Don't just take everything I say as you know, the law. It's not. Okay? Doubt me, question me, research. Right? Self-discovery requires honesty, and honesty requires humility. I'm gonna be completely honest out there and say that I'm not intelligent. I've not figured everything out. I'm not this, genius who's got the secret to life. No, I'm also on the same journey as you guys. We're all in it together. Isn't that special? Isn't that lovely? Right? And as such, I'm susceptible to mistakes, okay? I'm not infallible. I'm not perfect. Nobody's perfect, okay? And I would even take a step further and say that I'm far from perfect. I'm actually a terrible, terrible human being. But I'm learning to be better. And that's the important thing. We have to keep improving. You have to keep trying. You have to keep going. So, should any concerns arise, please don't hesitate to leave a comment down below, okay? So that we can engage in, a proper, intellectualized, and civilized discourse, dialogue. Again, keep an open mind, please. With that being said, let's dive into the purpose of this channel. Again, I mentioned that the reason why this is the topic for today is because it segues into our introduction for this channel as the first video. The purpose of this channel is to further push myself and discover myself both as a person and as a content creator, because I believe that creation is also part of self-discovery, because you never truly know yourself until you test your thoughts against the world and against other people. Let that sink in for a second. So, in that sense, this channel is essentially me trying to understand myself, my life, my faith, my purpose, and my discipline in a public setting, okay? With that being said, that leads me into the topic for today, the art of self-discovery. Sun Tzu said in his book, The Art of War, if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. If you know yourself, but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you will also suffer a defeat. If you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. Now, why did I bring up Sun Tzu and the art of war if we're talking about self-discovery? What's the connection? Now, I think this quote perfectly introduces the idea of self-discovery, because before you can improve your life, you first need to understand what exactly you need to improve on. And to do that, you have to identify what you're fighting against. Who is your enemy? And I think the interesting about the enemy that is being mentioned in Sun Tzu, obviously he mentioned it in a context of war. And in the same way, self-discovery can also be a war against the enemy in your life. It can mean many different things. Depending on the person, it can be addiction, it can be fear, insecurity, laziness, pride, trauma, loneliness, unhealthy relationships, purposelessness, and even your environment or your circumstances. For some people, the enemy is external, but for most people, the enemy is internal. And, in my personal experience, I eventually realized that the enemy wasn't necessarily the world around me. The enemy was me. The enemy was my mindset. It was my habits. It was my lack of discipline, my inability to confront myself honestly. I realized that I was constantly sabotaging my own growth while I was blaming life for my stagnation. And I think that's one of the hardest truths that a person can face. Sometimes self-discovery begins by discovering the parts of yourself that are actively sabotaging and destroying your life. I think a lot of people understand the feeling of wanting to change while simultaneously sabotaging yourself. the heart wants one thing and the mind wants another. They're not following each other properly. And sometimes the greatest deception in our lives is the version of ourselves that we refuse to confront honestly, right? And if we don't do that, we get in our own way. We step in the bear trap that we set for ourselves. Because, with all due respect, your mindset, your beliefs, your habits, your perspective, all of that eventually shapes the direction of your life. And if you don't confront yourself, then how are you ever going to go anywhere meaningful? How are you going to get to the direction that you need to go to achieve your goals, your dreams, everything that you've desired, right? In my personal experience, in the past, I've had a lot of time to reflect, and I realized that the three main things that got in my way in the past was, firstly, a hedonistic lifestyle, right? For those of you who don't know, hedonism is a philosophical and psychological framework that prioritizes pleasure and the avoidance of pain above anything else, okay? That's hedonism. So I had a hedonistic lifestyle, I had a victim mindset, and obviously I had this bitterness and hatred in my heart. It was those three things that got in my way, right? Hedonism, constantly chasing temporary pleasure, entertainment, validation, comfort, and distraction. I avoided responsibility. I avoided discipline. I avoided discomfort. I avoided self-reflection. I lived reactively instead of intentionally because I was distracted. Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verse 10 to 11 says, I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. Yet, when I surveyed all that my hands had done, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Now, Ecclesiastes, for those of you who don't know, is the book written by King Solomon. And King Solomon, according to the Bible, was the wisest person on earth at the time, I think, or in the history of the entire world. I'm not sure. But he was wise, essentially. He was incredibly, incredibly wise and knowledgeable. I mean, he was the king of Israel at the time, right? So, I don't know. It's a big feat. Not only was he wise, though, he was, I think, the richest person at the time, and he had 1,000 concubines. So, I guess, in the standard of, civilization in his time, he was incredibly successful. But in that book that he wrote, he talked about how indulging in all those things, all those material possessions and material wealth, pleasure, possessions, entertainment, and all those achievements that he had, he realized at the end everything was meaningless. Everything was purposeless. It was all empty. And I think his story teaches us a very valuable lesson that is very timely, especially in, consideration to modern life. Because I think modern life now encourages endless consumption while ignoring the deeper question of fulfillment. And I think there's always, I think even in more so in today's society, there's a tension between temporary desires and long-term growth, right? Victim mindset. A victim mindset is a psychological state in which a person consistently perceives themselves as powerless, oppressed, or incapable of changing their circumstances. I blamed life. I blamed people. I blamed circumstances, or I blamed the past for every single problem. I refused accountability for my own life because I felt like accountability was uncomfortable. I trapped myself in pity and helplessness, and I believed that my suffering justified being stagnant. Romans 12 verse 2 says, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. I think in that sense, you have to understand that transformation, similar to self-discovery, they're two sides of the same coin. They both begin internally before they manifest externally. It requires renewing the way you think. Self-discovery requires renewing the way you think. You can't just blame everything on your environment, right? You can't just know these things and not do anything about it. right? Because knowledge without action changes nothing. Eventually, you're going to have to take responsibility for your life because no one's going to be there to save you but yourself. Who's going to pick you back up when you fall in the mud? Nobody. Especially if they don't know anything about it. But you do. So get up. Hatred, bitterness. That's another thing that got in my way. And that's the most terrible thing that I've ever done to myself. You know, this sense of bitterness, this unresolved anger and resentment, it slowly consumed me emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. I had resentment towards life, resentment towards other people, resentment towards myself. And I allowed that pain and anger to transform me into somebody that was emotionally isolated and pessimistic, negative, a cynic, okay? I carried all this emotional baggage and weight in me, and that poisoned my perspective on life, right? And I think the worst part of all of these things is that these three traits that really stuck me was the fact that they reinforced each other, right? Because hedonism distracts you from the reality of your situation, from your problems. And victim mentality convinces you that there's nothing you can do about your problems. You can't solve them. You can't do it. You can't do anything. It's your fault. It's not your fault. That's what victim mentality brainwashes you into thinking. And hatred and bitterness makes you resent yourself and the world around you. And I think all of that leads to stagnation. And it's not just external stagnation. It's spiritual, it's emotional, it's intellectual, it's personal. And I think that's one of the most dangerous things you can do to yourself and the most dangerous things that you can live in because you're alive physically, but internally you stop growing. Okay? It's the same habits, the same excuses, the same destructive cycle every single day. It's the same mindset. And I think it's important to create this distinction that stagnation is different from being mediocre. Because to be mediocre and to experience mediocrity is just to be average. But stagnation means to refuse moving forward in life, okay? As we've established, times change. People change. But if you don't change along with the times, you become stagnant. You refuse to move forward. And eventually, that becomes depressing because deep down you know you're capable of so much more, but you keep betraying your own potential. And over time, I realized that the enemy wasn't the world around me, it was me. I was my own enemy. I was my own deepest struggle. I was my greatest obstacle. And I understood that it came not just from my lack of discipline, it also came from this need for self-preservation. I understood that it was my coping mechanism. It was me in survival mode, just trying to survive. It was a lack of self-awareness, a lack of purpose. And I think that's where self-discovery begins. It's when you stop blaming everything around you and start confronting yourself honestly. Because if I never did that, I would never figure out that those were the reasons why I was getting in my own way. And all of that started when I experienced my very first rock bottom in life. And I think that began around October 2023. And it forced me into a state of self-reflection for the very first time. And obviously, you know, people self-reflect all the time, but that was the point in my life where I really just started to take a long, hard look at myself and like, oh, that's why. Okay, we got to fix that. All right, I started trying new things. I started pushing myself out of my comfort zone in a way that I had never done before. And I questioned the kind of person that I was becoming and the kind of person that I wanted to become. And I think that's wonderful because it teaches you the valuable lesson that suffering, even the worst kind of suffering, exposes parts of yourself that comfort hides. Okay? So my rock bottom introduced me to the worst parts of myself. Genesis 50 verse 20 says, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Now that verse comes from the story of Joseph the Dreamer. And if you don't know, Joseph the Dreamer got sold to slavery by his brothers. And that verse is him telling his brothers that although you sold me to slavery, it ended up for the betterment of the world. Because eventually, he ended up as Pharaoh of Egypt at the time, and he helped Egypt get out of a long and hard famine, right? So whatever struggle or pain you experience in the past, that shouldn't be a license for you to just keep living terribly in the present. No, it should be rocket fuel for you to propel yourself out of that hole that you dug for yourself. It should be a way for you to recognize, hold on, all that bad happened to me. I can use that for good. And that's exactly what I started thinking in my head. And look where I am now. I'm not smarter. I mean, I am smarter, sorry. I'm wiser. I'm better, much better, okay? I genuinely believe that whatever hell you've been through, it can be a means for you to establish a heaven through you. I believe that whatever hell you experience, it can become this sort of foundation for growth, for wisdom, for empathy, for purpose. Pain can become meaningful when it transforms you instead of destroying you, okay? And I think this is where I started developing what I would describe as Christian Stoicism. Now, for those of you who don't know, Stoicism is a school of thought, or sort of philosophical school of thought, propagated by Marcus Aurelius, right? I don't exactly know I think he was the emperor or something of Greece, Rome? I don't know which one. But Marcus Aurelius was this philosopher dude also. And he established Stoicism. And essentially, the principle of Stoicism is that you can't exactly control the struggles you face in life, but you can control how you react to those struggles. And similarly, that's what the faith teaches us. That's what Christianity teaches us. That trials and struggles, all those things that God allows into our life, can also become blessings. Because although, suffering itself is not inherently good, it can produce growth. It can produce discipline, wisdom, endurance, humility, purpose. And I think the mindset of Christian Stoicism puts life into an informed, optimistic perspective, because you're acknowledging that, reality, that stuff sucks, life sucks, but you're not allowing yourself to be consumed by negativity. You understand that you can't control the challenges you face, but you can control how you react to those challenges. James, the book of James teaches this very, very vividly. James chapter 1 verses 2-4 says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance." Trials aren't always punishment. Sometimes it's preparation. And this brings me to Romans, a letter by St. Paul to the Romans. Romans chapter 5 verses 3-5 says, "We also glory in our sufferings, because we know that the suffering produces perseverance. Perseverance, character, and character, hope." Okay? Pain can either harden a person or refine them. The difference is how you choose to respond to it. Okay? And I think Christian Stoicism taught me that pain doesn't automatically ruin a person. Sometimes it reveals them, right? Instead of asking myself, why is this happening to me? I started, shifting it. And I started asking, what is this trying to teach me? Okay? And it's through that mindset that I slowly began realizing that self-discovery is born through adversity. Okay? Because difficult seasons force you to confront your weaknesses, your values, your habits, your beliefs, your identity. And it taught me something important about growth. That success and transformation aren't linear. It's not just, no. Sometimes it's, okay? You don't just go from rags to riches. It's oftentimes hard and painful, and you don't know what to do, and there's no reassurance that things are going to be okay, right? We often romanticize change without ever understanding the emotional and psychological processes that go behind the scenes. And I think that naturally segues into this next idea that I would like to bring up: the emotional cycle of change. The emotional cycle of change is a psychological framework developed by Don Kelly and Daryl Conner, consisting of 5 stages. Number 1, uninformed optimism. Number 2, informed pessimism. Number 3, the valley of despair. And number 4, informed optimism. And number 5, sorry, there's a 5th, success and fulfillment. So it's uninformed optimism, informed pessimism, the valley of despair, informed optimism, and success and fulfillment. I think many people quit whatever it is that they're attempting to do, and essentially whatever journey that they're taking, because of the valley of despair, because they mistake this sense of discomfort for failure. And that is something that we need to dispel. Just because you're down in the mud doesn't mean that you failed. You fail when you're down in the mud and you say to yourself, I can't do it, I quit. That's when you fail. But if you're down in the mud and you say to yourself, you know what, I'm going to get back up, right? That is simply discomfort, right? When you fall, you pick yourself back up. Discomfort isn't failure. Discomfort is evidence that transformation, that change is taking place. Growth oftentimes happens slowly and invisibly before it becomes visible externally. Sometimes endurance is less about feeling strong and it's more about continuing whatever you're doing despite weakness, despite feeling like you've got nothing left in you. And self-discovery is oftentimes, or most of the time, or almost always going to be uncomfortable because it forces you to confront the things about yourself that you normally avoid. Your ego, your insecurities, your habits, your fears. But the reward for enduring that process is clarity. Clarity about who you are, about what you value, and who you want to become. So now we get into the practical steps for self-discovery. Discovery. Number 1, spend time alone without distractions, okay? No music, no doom scrolling, no stimulation. Learn to just sit with yourself, with your own thoughts. At the time, I couldn't do that because there was so much bitterness in my heart for everything that I had done to myself. I couldn't sit with myself because every time I got into my own head, I thought you are a failure and you're getting in your own way and you're so dumb, you're so stupid, you're so incredibly ignorant. How could you let yourself fail time and time again? But sometimes you just have to sit in there with that demon in your head, with that monkey banging on the walls, banging on the cage. Learn to sit with your own thoughts. And I think I was able to much better endure through that process because I journaled, okay? I journaled my thoughts, I journaled my emotions consistently. And I looked at things from a practical perspective and I realized, oh my gosh, there's a pattern, guys. And that pattern is going to reveal itself over time, right? And that is going to help you decode what exactly it is that you need to focus on in order to get rid of the things that are tripping you up. Number 2, try things that intimidate you, okay? I saw this one post on Instagram before, and it was after I had already overcome all those big problems about myself, and I was really just tweaking. It said something about like, oh, every day do something that's uncomfortable. Do 5 things that are uncomfortable. Do 3 things that are going to challenge you. Do 1 thing that you feel like is going to kill you. And, obviously don't do that, right? Because self-discovery isn't, a one-size-fits-all solution. You can't just, do all these things. I'm Andrew Tate. I'm David Goggins. Do 1,000 push-ups. It's going to help you. Depends on the person, guys. But they are right about one thing. Try things that intimidate you, okay? Because discomfort, as we've established, it exposes your weakness, but it also exposes your potential. Another thing, consume meaningful content. That helped me so much, guys. Consume meaningful content. For me, I started reading the Bible, okay? And, to some people that might be like, okay, whatever, dude. But it does help. And I'm not saying just read the Bible. No, whatever it is that you find meaningful, read that. Consume that. It doesn't even have to be a book. It can be a video essay. It can be, a podcast. Read something or consume something that is going to elevate you. Books, scripture, philosophy, conversations, okay? You can interact with people, and that interaction can be meaningful if you intentionally steer it towards that direction. You have to do those things. And another thing, ask yourselves difficult questions and answer them honestly, okay? Stuff like, who am I becoming? What habits are destroying me? What do I actually value? It's simple, but it can make the biggest difference, okay? Another thing, surround yourself with people who challenge you to grow, okay? Criticism, when constructive, is necessary for self-awareness. That's another thing that we're going to get into. And most importantly, pace yourself, because self-discovery isn't a race. It's a lifelong process. Okay, spend time alone without distractions. Journal your thoughts. Try things that intimidate you. Consume meaningful content. Ask yourself difficult questions. Surround yourself with people who challenge you to grow. And most importantly, pace yourself. 7 things, guys. 7 steps. I wrote that down like 10 minutes ago. Or not 10 minutes ago, sorry. 10 minutes ago before this. Plant analogy. I have a little analogy, little metaphor for you guys, okay? And it revolves around plants. But first, let me drink some water. Water break. Guys, take some time to drink water. I got myself a little aqua flask here. I'm going to drink water. Okay. Rejuvenated, hydrated, let's go, let's kick it. Plants. We all know that plants grow and flourish when they have enough water and sunlight. Therefore, if a plant doesn't have enough sunlight, it dies. If it doesn't have enough water, it dies. But also, if it has too much, it dies. If it has too much water, it drowns. If it has too much sun, it wilts, right? It dries up. The point is, plants need the right balance of resources in order to thrive. And I think people also need the right balance of resources in order to thrive on the path of self-discovery. Let's go back to what plants need. Plants need water and sunlight. Now, what is the equivalent of those 2 things to us? Now, personally, I don't think there are 2 individual things that perfectly encompass that, but for the sake of this metaphor, I've been able to determine 4 things. Water to us is like knowledge and wisdom, okay? So to plants, it's water, but to us, it's knowledge and wisdom. Now, side note, people might wonder, what is the difference between knowledge and wisdom? Knowledge is information, and wisdom is knowing what to do with that information, okay? Now that we've clarified that, let's continue. If a person doesn't have enough knowledge and wisdom, they're going to find themselves unequipped for new experiences and opportunities. In other words, they're going to stagnate. Now, what about too much knowledge and wisdom? You're going to be like, Josh, is that a thing? Can a person be too smart? Isn't knowledge power? You're right, but not entirely, because I think, at least for me, knowledge and wisdom are vector quantities. They don't just require magnitude, they also require direction. And in this context, direction is purpose, okay? Because there's so many fields of knowledge nowadays that you can study, okay? Academia, it's not just, I'm going to increase my knowledge. Obviously, you study different topics, different subjects. You need a direction, okay? That is why knowledge and wisdom are vector quantities. They're not just scalar. They're not just, I'm going to build my intelligence. No, this isn't a game, guys. This is reality. And without that purpose, knowledge becomes arrogance. It becomes overthinking. It becomes analysis paralysis. You think so much that you don't even do anything, okay? It's empty intellectualism. Now, sunlight. Sunlight to plants. What is that to people? I think the most similar thing I can liken it to is experience and criticism. in the sense that if a person doesn't receive enough experience and criticism, they become ignorant. And that can lead to two things: false confidence and stagnation. Or sorry, false confidence or stagnation. Too much of it also leads to something else. Okay? Too much experience without proper wisdom leads to bitterness. It leads to bitterness, cynicism, and feeling jaded. Now, too much criticism can lead to insecurity, self-hatred, and hopelessness. Okay? Once again, self-discovery requires balance. It doesn't require isolation from life. It requires proper engagement with it. You have to put yourself out there in order to experience sunlight. Similarly, you have to put yourself out there to have experiences and to be able to be criticized by people. How are they going to criticize you if you don't even put yourself out there in the world? Huh? Explain that. We need water. We need knowledge and wisdom. We need experience and we need criticism in order to build a foundation for self-discovery. So what is the moral of the story? What is the point that I'm trying to make with that analogy? Balance. Pace yourself on the journey of self-discovery. Sorry. Another thing. This stuff, okay, can I just say, side note, this shouldn't even be a big deal. This isn't like some Sigma grind set ideology. I'm an alpha male. I'm working on bettering my life. I'm going to become a millionaire. No. The type of content I want to create isn't that. That is disgusting. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, disgusting. I just want to create stuff that I have learned from my own personal experiences. We're not reaching the maximum, guys. This is the bare minimum. This is just learning how to live life properly, intentionally, and meaningfully. So let's circle back. Creation, content creation, the artistic process, self-discovery. Now, in my personal goals now, I want to dive into my artistic process. I want to create stuff. I think one of the biggest traps in modern life is endless consumption without creation, okay? You're constantly watching stuff, you're constantly scrolling, you're constantly absorbing, but you're never expressing. Now, I've had a lot of interactions with art, especially recently. And I think art taught me the most that self-discovery can also happen through creation. As I mentioned before, it's one of the biggest things in self-discovery, because otherwise you're never going to be able to test your thoughts against the world and against other people. Art taught me that self-discovery also happens through creation. It's through writing, literature, theater, content creation, and conversation. Because whenever you create something, you're externalizing a part of yourself, a part of your beliefs, your emotions, your perspective. And sometimes you don't even understand what's inside you until you attempt to create something from it. Humanity was made in the image of God, and God is the creator. And I think that also implies that there is a capacity in us, specially designed for us to create. Human creativity. I think that also reflects this sort of godly quality in us in some way. Because creativity and artistry, they're not meaningless things, okay? They're gifts with purpose. And I realize that people need something meaningful to direct their energy towards. Because without direction, energy just becomes self-destructive. You got nowhere to go. You just explode. For example, artists have their craft. Religious people have their relationships with their gods. Athletes, they have their discipline. Scholars have their pursuit of knowledge. Creators have creation. I think every person needs something bigger than temporary pleasure and distraction. You know, something that's going to give your suffering meaning, something that's going to give your discipline purpose, something that's going to ground your identity. Whatever you devote your attention, your time, your energy towards, that's going to shape who you become. And if you do not intentionally direct your energy towards growth, purpose, faith, or creation, that energy is going to get consumed by escapism, by addiction, by negativity, by stagnation. I think self-discovery is partly the process of discovering what is truly worthy of your time, your energy, your attention, and your devotion. What kind of life do you want to build? What kind of person do you want to become? What kind of purpose is worth your suffering? Because purpose and intentionality transform ordinary actions into meaningful ones. And that's why, I also value my artistic process. And I value, in general, the artistic process because creation gives direction to emotion, okay? It gives you meaning. Whenever you create something, you're transforming your experiences into something useful, not just for yourself, but potentially for other people, right? And that's why I want to dabble into content creation, because I want to challenge myself to produce content for people as a means of not just self-fulfillment, but also evangelization, and also self-discovery. I think people should use their gifts and the lessons that they learn from their lives to positively impact other people instead of just hiding them. And this channel is a testament to that sentiment. Ooh, bars! It's proof that growth begins by putting yourself out there, despite fear, despite insecurity, despite imperfection, because you discovered yourself by participating in life instead of hiding from it. So put yourself out there for the world to see, and put your energy out there into the world, whether it's through art, discipline, service, creation, or faith. Because a person without direction is going to get lost within themselves. But a person with purpose can transform even suffering into something meaningful. Think about it like this. Maybe someone out there needs the lessons that you're learning right now. And maybe somewhere out there, a person is learning a lesson that you need. Create and put yourself out there. I think the art of self-discovery ultimately comes down to this. It's learning who you are, confronting who you're not, and becoming who you were meant to be. Transformation is possible, guys. No matter how lost, how broken, or how stagnant you might feel, transformation is possible. And life, sure, life is going to humble you, okay? Suffering is going to test you. It's going to experience it's going to make you experience all the things in life that you're just going to suffer. Okay? You're going to have the worst of it. You're going to have the terrible time. Through all of that, you have to understand that the goal isn't to be perfect. Think of it like this. You're this baby bird that got thrown out of the nest, okay? Your job right now isn't to fly marvelously, because you don't even have the wings for it. It's to survive in a way that is meaningful. Not just in the same way that I did all those years ago, throwing away my time, throwing away my effort into useless distractions. The goal in life isn't perfection. It's transformation. Growth, my friends, growth is ongoing. And, self-discovery isn't something that is going to happen overnight. Again, it's a process. It's going to happen for the rest of your life. You're going to keep discovering new things about yourself, and that's the beauty of it. Maybe the person you're searching for is built through the process itself. It's built through every failure that you experience, every lesson that you learn, every difficult conversation you have with yourself or with the people around you, and every risk that you take in faith, hoping that it will be for the betterment of yourself. With that being said, thank you for watching. And I hope that all of us continue to discover ourselves properly. But most importantly of all, honestly. Thanks for watching, guys. That brings me to the end of our first video. Make sure to like and subscribe, guys. Share this to your friends and comment down below what you thought. Bye-bye. End video.